All right, welcome everyone. It's Thursday, January 25th, 2024, and we're launching the select board meeting at 6:30 p.m. with the executive session. So I'd like to ask the assistant town administrator to please read the executive session agenda.
Good evening. Item number 1 is to discuss strategy with respect to threatened potential litigation. If the chair so declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the select board in the town, and the chair does so declare to discuss the matter of Five Star Corp versus the town of Sherborn, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A, 3 and 7, and Suffolk Construction versus DCAM, 449 Mass, 444, 2007 for the library. Item number 2 is pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A7, to comply with act under the authority of General Law, Chapter 30, Section 2022, to review the minutes of executive sessions in Suffolk Construction versus DCAM, 449 Mass, 444, 2007, review of executive session minutes of April 7th, 22, April 21st, 2022, May 5th, 2022, May 19th, 2022, June 16th, 2022, July 14th, 2022, August 11th, August 25th, and September 8th, 2022. You'll need a second and a roll call.
Okay, so I do so declare that we need to cover both these items in executive session because there could be a threat to the potential negotiating position of the town. So I move that we enter executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, roll call. Eric?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
And I am I as well. So you can turn the recording off, please, Diane. So I'd like to open the open meeting session of the select board meeting on January 25th, 2024. And I'd like to ask the assistant town administrator to please read the open session agenda.
Good evening. After I read the agenda, the board can vote to amend or approve the agenda. I don't have any public comment tonight, but we do have an announcement that Heidi Doyle would like to make tonight. Items may be taken out of order and topics not anticipated 40 hours in advance may be added. Item number 1 is the consideration of acceptance of grants from Sue Kelleher for the Council on Aging Director. Item 2 is various appointments. The Cultural Council, vote to amend the appointment term of Kathy Horrigan Dye to a term to expire 12/30/24. The Council on Aging, Denise Orlando for a term to expire June 15th, 2027. That is a new appointment. And the Southwest Area Planning Council, Heidi Doyle, the town planner, for a term to expire June 15th, 2027. That's also a new appointment. Item number 3 is the consideration of the draft select board meeting policy. Jerry Marset and Marion Newton will talk on that tonight. Item number 4 is the Community Preservation Act CPA analysis. Jerry Marset will speak to that. Item number 5 is the preliminary review discussion regarding capital request for 2024 annual town meeting for FY 2025. And here tonight will be Jerry Marset, Chief Zach Ward, Chief Thomas Galvin, Sean Colleen, George Fisk, David Welch, and Don Fattori. Item number 6 is the consent agenda, which is the payroll warrant, minutes of January 11th, 2024, minutes of January 16th, 2024, minutes of 12/14/2023 and 12/5/2023, and a request for the consideration of a letter of support to the Mass DCR regarding the Mass Trails Grant Program. Item number 7 is the consideration of routine business, which will be select board reports and the town administrator reports.
Excellent, thank you. And one change to the agenda, we're gonna defer tonight the Cultural Council appointment. So that will be handled at the next select board session. Are there any other suggested revisions to the agenda? If not, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as modified?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, a roll call, Eric,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Marion, and I as well. So Heidi, do you want to go ahead and make the announcement, please?
Thank you. So good evening. I think a lot of the community has heard about the MBTA new community law on multifamily overlay zoning district. And this was the state's response to the chronic housing shortage that you're seeing, where housing prices and renting prices have been increasing. And it's become very difficult for families, especially those trying to buy a new house or people downsizing, to find affordable housing or just housing in general in these communities. So the state has come up with this new law that, especially if you are an MBTA community where you host a site, or if you are an adjacent community, which we are, that you have to create a zoning district, not necessary to build it, but to be able to have the capacity to have multifamily housing. So Sherborn has, as an adjacent community, is proposing this. There's information on our planning department, the documents that people can look at, FAQs, and we have a public hearing on February 6th in the evening. That is going to be a hybrid meeting that we'd like to welcome the community, and I'd be happy to answer any questions for those residents in between. Thank you.
Thanks for alerting us to it. So the first agenda item is acceptance of grants. That's Sue. I see you there, Sue. How are you?
Good. How are you, Jeff?
Good, good.
So we've, the Council on Aging applied and received 3 grants. The first one is from the state. It's part of the formula grant, which every COA in every city and town receives money according to how many seniors are in the town, and they do a formula. So we received half of that in the amount of $7,245. The rest of it should come later on in the spring. The second one is that as part of the community assessment, there was a lot of requests for outdoor fitness programs. So we applied to the Metro West Health Foundation, and we received a $10,000 grant to do some outdoor fitness programs. And we received half of the money, $5,000, and then in June or July, we'll receive the other half. And then we finally, we received a grant from the Mass Cultural Council for $2,500 to run a watercolor program, which has been very popular. It's been since ongoing since November, will run through March. So I ask that you move to accept these grants.
All right, thank you for securing them though and pursuing them. And Paul is our expert on grant approvals.
So I move that we accept a grant of $7,245 from the Office of Elder Affairs, a grant from the Metro West Health Foundation in the amount of $10,000, and a grant from the Massachusetts Cultural Council for $2,500, all pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Eric,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Marion,
Aye.
and I as well. Thank you very much, Sue. Great work.
Congratulations on getting us
Yeah.
this money.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
the program and on the programs that people really enjoy and enforce. So, all right, so we're going to move on to item 2, consideration of various appointments. Don't go anywhere. I don't know if you want to announce. I see Denise is here too. The COA is the first one for Denise Orlando.
Yeah, so we Jim Campbell was on our board, and as you know, he defected to Millis. So he stayed on as an associate member, and Denise was lovingly recruited from another board member, actually 2 board members. So she came to a meeting last month and decided she would join us, and we're very excited to have a new board member. So we're bringing her forward tonight.
Excellent.
So
Go ahead, Paul.
So can I move to appoint Denise Orlando to the Council on Aging for a term to expire June 15, 2027?
Absolutely, you can. But before we vote, do you want to say anything, Denise? No, you're good. You're muted. We can't hear you. You're muted. You'll get used to Zoom.
Sorry.
We live
Um,
in the Zoom world.
I've been retired a while, so anyway, I'm excited to join the board. I'm a long-term resident of Sherborn and I am aging in place. So I think it's a wonderful organization and Sue seems to be doing a terrific job. So I'm excited to join and be of some help.
Absolutely. You'll be a great addition. So
Yeah.
thank you. So do we have a second to Paul's motion?
Second.
Okay, Eric,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
aye, and Marion,
Aye.
and I am I. So welcome and thanks again, Denise, and great job, Sue.
Thank you.
Next one is the Southwest Area Planning Council, which is Heidi for a term to expire in June 15th. I don't know if someone needs to, can we just vote on it? I think we can just vote on it, can't we, Paul?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to appoint Heidi Doyle,
Okay, is there a second?
Southwest Area Planning Council for a term to expire June 15, 2027.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Eric,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Marion,
Aye.
and I am I as well. She's muted, but she's on, she's good to go now, I think. Jeremy, you're next with and Marion with the select board meeting policy.
Thanks, Jeff. So this has been on your agenda for a couple of your past meetings. I believe December 7th, December 28th. You had some discussions on this. The original policy actually dates back to July 15th, 2021, when the select board at the time voted to adopt a policy to, quote, enhance public meeting access by setting a new transparency standard. That policy in 2021 required that your appointed boards utilize Zoom and allow for that remote participation. Since then, we've grown more comfortable using Zoom and hybrid meetings. We have more equipment throughout town, and there's been more interest in allowing folks to view meetings remotely or watch them after the fact. So based on your last meeting, Mary and I did meet and rewrote that policy from 2021, updated it, made it a bit more concise, and also added the suggestion that not only your appointed boards, but also the elected boards of the planning board and the Board of Health be subject to the same policies of that you're currently imposing on yourself and the Conservation Commission and the ZBA. That's the major change. The policy also does reiterate your current policy of asking that major regulatory boards to avoid setting their meetings the same nights as select board meetings, so that select board members have the ability to attend those meetings. But the policy essentially sets up two options for those four boards to record their meetings. One, either use Zoom to hold a virtual meeting or a hybrid meeting and use Zoom to record the meeting, and then have the recording then provided to Dover Sherborn Cable TV for them to edit and then rerun. And then option two is to utilize the services directly of Dover Sherborn TV and have them video meetings and then edit and then rerun those on their cable program or cable shows. So the policy does give some guidance and some references of who folks boards could go to get assistance on this policy should they need training or assistance setting up meetings or coordinating with Dover Sherborn TV, setting up a Zoom meeting or the like. So
It's also not I'm interrupting, but not just rerunning, but then transferring to YouTube also, so that people can view them in their own time.
Correct.
Right.
Marion, anything you'd like to add?
No, we also make it clear that it is perfectly legal for anyone attending a meeting to record that meeting, as long as they alert the chair, and the chair can let everyone know that the meeting is being recorded. And other than that, I think it's really straightforward. We'll just have a more uniform policy for the regulatory boards. And other boards can choose to do so, or for an important meeting, can make sure they're recorded and posted on YouTube, but they don't have to do it for every meeting.
Okay, we have
Well,
two
Marianne.
questions. Eric has a question. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, so Marion, I don't think we can put that in a policy, but legally, I think anyone that shows up to a public meeting can record it. You know what I mean? Like, if they notify the chair or not. That might be something just of good form or to be polite, but I'm not sure how much a policy will stand up that says like you have to notify the chair. If anyone shows up because it's a public meeting, I think they can just hit record on their phone and
I think you're right. I took a look at that law, and maybe Paul can correct me. I think they do. They should inform the board. I mean, the way it probably would play out is that someone at the meeting would start to record. The chair would say, "Are you recording? You should let us know." And they say, "Yes, we're recording," and then it's announced to everyone. But it's not up to the board. It's anyone has the right to do it. You're right, Eric.
So if I could just supplement that.
Yes, go ahead, Paul.
So there's a criminal law that says you can't record people without their knowledge. And in order to comply with that law, what the open meeting law provides is that people who come to a public meeting need to be told whether or not the meeting's being recorded. If the meeting's being recorded, then they comply with the criminal law and with the open meeting law. In the case of individuals who want to record the meeting, they're picking up other people. So they are in essence violating that criminal law. So the open meeting law requires anybody who's recording other people to notify the chair so that the chair, everybody, you're being recorded. Now that's often covered by the fact that the chair has already announced that you're being recorded. So it's not automatic that you have to let the chair know when the chair has already told everybody they're being recorded. But the law is clear. The person's recording often doesn't know what happened before they got to the meeting, and therefore they have to notify the chair that they're recording the meeting so that the chair can make the announcement. That's in the open meeting law.
Okay. Any other? I don't see any other comments. Do you have another comment too, Paul?
Yeah, on the policy as a whole, we've discussed this many times. I think everybody knows my position on this, and I'm going to restate it just for the benefit of the public or the voters. I think everybody on the board knows my position. So I'm going to vote no on adopting this policy. And I'm going to vote no, even though I support the idea that all these meetings should be recorded. I'm going to be voting no for a variety of reasons. First, there are legal reasons that the Board of Selectmen has jurisdiction defined by law, and that jurisdiction does not extend to the Planning Board or the Board of Health. The second part of that is that the open meeting law specifically does not require recording. Doesn't require any meeting to be recorded. And there was a lot of reasons for that, and I could bore you for an hour why the general court decided not to require recordings. But where state law doesn't require recordings, here we are doing something different and going outside our jurisdiction. Also, I'd point out that a lot of the authorizations for things like Zoom meetings expire in March. And we've been working with Mara to extend, we've been working with Governor Healy to extend the authorization for things like Zoom and that kind of technology. That bill has just been submitted. We're trying to get that passed before the expiration of the authority. But it's not, while it's likely to get passed and likely to get passed in time, it may not. You never know with legislation. So there's uncertainty about what technology the general court will finally authorize. The other reason is there ought to be comity and courtesy between boards, elected boards. The planning board and the Board of Health are unpaid volunteers who come forward from this community and do the best they can to help make this town a better place. As far as I'm concerned, they should be commended and supported and not told what to do by another elected board who has no jurisdiction. I think this is the wrong way to go. If we want to have all meetings in Sherborn recorded, the way to do that, as I've discussed before, is for us to put an article on the warrant for a bylaw that would simply say all meetings of all boards or of all regulatory boards, and list the boards that we want have to be recorded, and leave it up to the people to tell these other boards what they want. So this is the wrong approach. And for those reasons, I'm going to be voting no.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Stephen.
Yeah, I'll take the complete opposite view from Paul. I do believe that we have an opinion from town council saying that the select board does have the jurisdiction to make this regulation or make this policy, I should say. I mean, I guess you, as also a lawyer, are free to disagree with town council, but I'm going to take town council's recommendation. I believe that what we are doing actually is responding to the voters. I think that the voters, the citizens in town, want all of these meetings to be recorded or in some way remotely viewable. And I think that that's what we're doing, is that we are responding to them. It doesn't require that a majority of the town request recording in order for recording of open meetings to happen. All it requires is that a single resident in the town wishes to attend the meeting and then record it, and they are legally allowed to do so. And I can say with 100% certainty that every single one of the regulatory board meetings, there is at least one citizen who wishes that meeting to be recorded, and they have told me so. And they are requesting that the select board simply make that happen for them so that they don't have to physically go to the meeting and do it. And with the way that Marion and Jeremy have written this policy, I think it's great, because it's not saying that the board chair or members have to do any massive amount of legwork to make it happen. They have the option to essentially just say, let's make Dover Sherborn Cable do it. We just have to notify them that the meeting is happening, and then DSC TV is going to take care of it for you. That's all you have to do. So it's not burdensome. It's something that the voters want, and we have an opinion from town council that we have the jurisdiction to make this policy, and I am 100% in support of it.
Okay, thank you. Marion?
Yeah, thank you very much, Stephen. That's exactly my line of thinking, as you can tell by the way this is written. And we were careful in paragraph 2 to say not that the select board is laying down a law here, but the policy of the select board is to require. And so it is a policy. We're not claiming that it's a law. But as Stephen said, any member of the public could record it. So even though, by the letter of the law, one might want to pass it through the town meeting. In fact, as Stephen said, the public is asking for this. And I have not yet heard one reason why a meeting should not be recorded. Not one valid reason, not one reason that wouldn't violate open meeting law. So I still support it the way it's written.
Okay, thank you. And Eric, you had your hand up, then put it down quickly, so I couldn't tell.
Yeah, no, call on Addie.
All right, Addie,
Sorry. Hi. I guess as a volunteer member on the planning board, I think, any of the regulatory boards, I know anytime that there seems to be this feeling that things are happening and not having a policy that's standard across regulatory boards makes it a challenge to set an expectation. I guess as a member, I would welcome a standard, a policy that furthers the notion of transparency, furthers the notion of the community to be able to be involved. We do have the technology now that we didn't have years ago. Even 3 years ago, we didn't have the technology. We have it now. We're all pretty adept at it. I know I've run a meeting and had technical glitches, and the only way we'll get better at it is starting with it. And if we try, I think most people in town think this is a no-brainer, and this kind of means schools are doing it. We've gotten through COVID, we've gotten through remote learning, we've gotten through, and it was, I think, assumed that we were already past this stage. So I hope we can make it kind of just a standard. This is how we do business.
okay, thanks, Addie. So I would just comment, I don't dispute what Paul said. I'm sure he's correct in a legal matter, but another thing I would point out, which Addie may sort of alluded to, is that some of the people that most want this to happen are people that are already on other boards. We right now have 540Bs being reviewed in process of review in town. And so people that are on the Board of Health want to see what the ZBA is doing or what the Conservation Commission is doing on those projects, but they can't attend every weeknight other meetings. So it also facilitates all of these projects that require multiple boards to review them. They can then in their own time go look at the meeting on YouTube that they weren't able to attend in person, and then incorporate it into their meeting. So I know, for example, that the Board of Health often and ZBA and Concom view the other regulatory board meetings to inform their meetings. So it's important not only for residents at large, but residents that are volunteers on boards and committees, so they don't have to attend multiple boards to be informed. So I guess I would say that I don't think Paul's wrong, but I think it's still a good policy and we should adopt it, because I think it'll be popular and we can, try to get forgiveness instead of permission in case someone challenges us. But I would support this. So does someone on the select board want to make a motion? I don't see any other hands raised for further discussion.
I'll move to adopt the policy as provided.
Okay,
I'll second that.
Support the
All
policy,
right.
whatever the correct
so we'll
term
do
is.
a roll call vote. Is there any other? I don't see any other hands raised, so we'll do a roll call vote. Eric,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Paul,
no,
Marion,
Aye.
and I am I as well. So it's 4-1, Diane. All right, so then we're on to Jeremy and the CPA.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm just gonna share something and go quickly through the update of this information since you've discussed this in the past. Let me get this shared. And this information is in your packet. So you've discussed that this is at a prior meeting, so the preliminary analysis that I had put together for you, giving some summary of what the Community Preservation Act was and when it was adopted and the history of it. I'm not gonna, repeat all that information. I think everybody's pretty well versed on that. But what I've done since, at your request, was to add to the analysis. There was a request to look at prior capital appropriations that Sherborn had done. So I went back 25 years through town meeting records and looked at capital appropriations, and then looked at what capital appropriations those projects could have been applied, CPA fundings that could have been applied to those, and made a tally. So over the course of the last 25 years, the match that is provided for the local CPA funds has averaged about 52%. Over the last 5 years, and we talked about this last time, which has kind of gotten a little more in the steady state, and probably a good indication of what future matches would be, is more like 30% match currently, because there's a lot more communities that have adopted the CPA. So just wanted to point out those two numbers as far as the match. There's the local portion of the CPA, then there's the fees that the registry collect, and that the state does sometimes with budget surpluses, appropriates to help provide a larger match for CPA funds. On average, again, over the last 25 years, that match has been 52%, and over the last 5 years, 30%. So it's been reducing as more communities got on board. You all know all the various uses that CPA could use. We talked about some peer communities and had those numbers. Ran some numbers of what different percentage of a surcharge might look like for Sherborn. Again, this is old information, just kind of showing to refresh your memory. But this slide here has the updated information by way of, on the left side of the screen here, the analysis of past capital appropriations. So looking back 25 years, the town had a total of 82 million in capital appropriations. For my analysis, it looks like about 6.8 million, 7 million of that amount may have been eligible for CPA funds to be utilized. That's on average about $275,000 per year in CPA funds. And then using those percentages I just mentioned, depending on when these projects were and the year that of the match, it varies. But for the sake of providing two estimates of what could have been the foregone state match in CPA funds, at 52%, the state, the Sherborn could have foregone. We decided not to take, by not having the CPA, 3.6 million in CPA matching funds, or with a more recent number, the 31%, that foregone amount was about $2 million. So I think that rounds out generally some of the information you were looking for. On the right here, this was a summary provided previously of some potential projects that CPA may apply to. And I guess I will note, I went back 25 years, but I also included FY25, the proposed capital for this spring. So it does include that. That obviously hasn't been approved yet, but just for the sake of known numbers, included that in the analysis. And I think the only other one question that folks had was that CPA does have some required spending in it, meaning, it's allowed to be used for various things, but it also requires a minimum amount each year to be used for open space and recreation, historic preservation, and community housing, 10% a minimum allotment to those or reserved for future use. And then 70% is undesignated. It's free for the community to choose how it's used. So that's the updated information, and hopefully helps inform your discussion.
Well, yeah, you can probably stop sharing. I guess I'm wondering though, I don't know that we need to vote on it, or do we need to, how do people feel about voting on it? I sort of have some opinions, but I'm willing to listen. So Eric, I think your hand was up first.
I got a lot of opinions.
I know.
I continue not to support this. It is basically a surcharge onto personal tax rates for a town that has some of the highest personal tax rates in the state, and certainly of all surrounding areas and within the region. But no matter what metric you take it per thousand, or actually average paid per resident or per household, I should say. You go back and the matching has decreased from 50 to 30%, and it's subjective funds. So frankly, it might even go down as a state is facing more of a shortage. 2 million over that many years to already have the surcharge and the tax, and it basically avoids the town approvals, especially you have to use some in open space with that additional requirement onto it. I think this is just a means to increase taxes and take away the decisions on expenditures away from town and town meeting. And also, I also finally disagree in some ways that, we would have saved 2.1 million over 25 years. Because that's assuming we would have used these funds to pay for projects we would have already asked town meeting for. As we saw with ARPA, we spent zero money on town meeting approved or capital expenditures that we would have asked town meeting for. We used it on pet projects. I don't have confidence that this board or any board in the past would have been fiscally responsible enough to actually put these funds toward intended capital projects. And so I think that, even the 2.1 million, as relatively small that is over 10 years or 20 years, 25 years, would have actually gone to would have gone to pet projects that some kind of interest would have wanted. So I will continue to oppose CPA. I don't think it's a fit for Sherborn. And yeah, for all those reasons, a surcharge onto some of the highest tax rate in the state is not something I'm going to support. Thank you. And removing the public from the decisions on capital projects.
Thank you, Eric. Stephen.
Yeah, I think again, I'm going to take the opposite view of Eric on this one. I think it is certainly at least worth discussing and putting to the town for a vote. I think that although we do have fairly high taxes, we aren't one of the top 5 taxed towns in the state. And furthermore, if we choose, for example, a 1.5% surcharge on our average tax bill of $17,800, it's only $267. It's not a massive amount. And that's even if we don't do the option where we don't count the first $100,000 of real estate value. And to me, the key thing to me is that obviously we've seen in recent weeks, Jeremy has presented to us the budget, and especially that the trend line for essentially we're about to hit our levy limit. And one of the issues that we have in this town is that 90+% of our revenue comes from property tax. We have very, very few revenue streams that are not basically residential property tax. And that's a problem. And I feel like it's challenging to find alternate revenue streams that aren't increasing the tax levy. And the key here is that this is an alternate revenue stream that does not count towards the tax levy. Although it is a tax in the sense that based on their property value, people have to pay more money to the town. It is a surcharge. It is outside of the tax levy, and it does not count towards the levy limit or the tax rate. And then furthermore, there is a state match. And so that is money coming from the state to help supplement this revenue stream. Another aspect of this is that essentially any town that is not a CPA community is effectively contributing to the state fund that is being distributed to other states. So not only are we not taking the money from the state, no, the town is contributing to all of the other CPA communities. And that seems like a bad fiscal policy to me. And it may very well be that the town voters decide against it, but I think that it is important enough that we try to find revenue streams outside of the tax levy that we really should consider this.
Well, go ahead, Paul.
I just want to correct one thing. There were comments that this takes things away from town meeting. It actually doesn't. The way the CPA Act works is, although money is set aside for all these projects, every year the CPA committee, called the CPC, comes to town meeting and asks for approval on the specific projects. All the projects have to be voted by a town meeting. So it still goes through the town meeting process. It's just the funding source is the Community Preservation Fund, not the general fund.
I'm
Okay,
not sure
thanks.
about that. I want you to double check that because I've experienced the opposite of that in another community.
So Marion, your hand is up.
It is up. Yeah, I totally appreciate what Eric is saying about this. People twice in the past have voted it down for the reasons that Eric enumerated, but I am in favor of giving the town the chance to look at it again and let the people decide. Of course, letting the people decide means that you have to present it, really thoroughly and really carefully so people can balance, the advantages for the community against the relatively small cost to themselves. And as long as there's a safety margin of $100,000 or whatever, as long as the lowest value properties don't have to pay the full tax on their property or surcharge, I think it is worth letting the town decide, because as Stephen says, even we do contribute to the CPA fund indirectly through state funds. And even though we probably contribute a little less than more populous towns because we have fewer, say, deed transfers. It's funded by, in part at least, by a surcharge on deed transfers. Whenever a house changes hands, a bit of the fee goes into the CPA fund. And we did indeed kind of miss the train when it left the station back in 2000. Towns like Lincoln, I believe, signed up big time for 3% and got 100% match. So they had a huge windfall. And those days are over, but it did go very low, and now it's up again because it's supplemented by the state through other funds. So I think it's worth putting it to the people, and let's see how they feel.
Okay, and so to make it shorter, I completely concur with everything Eric said. I agree with all of his points, so that's what I would say. So we don't currently have this on the warrant, do we, Jeremy? Is it on the warrant?
No, it's not currently on the warrant. So that would be, up to you folks whether you'd like to add it to the warrant or not. The warrant technically closed at 5 p.m. today.
So do people feel, I mean, obviously Eric and I wouldn't be in favor of adding it to the warrant. So do you three feel strongly enough that you want to reopen the warrant and add it to the warrant?
I would be in favor of doing that. I don't mind when something is a 3-2 and makes it on. I don't know how Paul is going to vote, but even
whatever
on
you
advisory,
decide.
I was not afraid of non-unanimous votes.
No, I don't think anyone should be. It actually looks better that we actually don't always agree, I think, and we think about things. But But you would then, one of you three would have to make the motion, another would have to second it if you want to vote. I think we would, Paul can correct me, I think we would have to vote first to reopen the warrant,
Yes,
and then vote to add this to the warrant, and then you can correct me again, Paul, but we may then have to vote to close the warrant right after doing that.
yes. 3
So-
votes.
So does that make sense to people?
Sure. Then
So
I'll make a motion.
entertain any, since
Yeah,
it's
I'll make
not
a
like-
motion to open the warrant.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, so let's do a roll call vote, Eric.
Well, first of all, what are we voting on? Because I don't have like an draft article in front of me here.
I
just
know
have a
we don't.
presentation.
Yeah, we don't have an article for
voting
the
to put-
CPA. What we're voting to do, and we may not have the language, three votes are, one is to reopen the warrant, one is to add consideration of the CPA to the warrant, to town meeting, which we don't have the language for yet, so that would then be subject to drafting the language, I think. Is that right, Paul?
We can put a
So-
placeholder, right?
So what the statute says is that town has to vote at town meeting to accept sections 3 through 7 of chapter 44B. That's the town meeting warrant article. You got to
Okay.
accept the statute. Then it
Okay.
goes to a ballot question. So we have to put it on a ballot.
Okay. So the
And if I
language
could-
isn't variable, in other words, the language is pretty rote, is what you're saying.
Yes, it's all statutory. And regarding, if I could just give me a second more, Eric's question about town meeting, the role of town meeting and the appropriations. I would suggest, Eric, that you look at section 5 of chapter 44B, which says that the Community Preservation Committee shall make recommendations to the legislative body for the acquisition, creation, and preservation of open space, for the acquisition, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of historic resources, for the acquisition, creation, preservation, rehabilitation, and restoration of land for recreational use, for the acquisition, creation, preservation, support of community housing, and for the rehabilitation. So it goes to town meeting, is what I'm saying. It's in the law. It's section 5B2 of chapter 44B.
And that's any expense at all, not just those categories you read off. Any expense of Community Preservation Act is limited to just those categories you read off.
But yeah, well,
also,
CPA
it-
is automatically limited to those categories.
Yes.
So even the
Okay.
70% that town is allowed to use, it can only use in one of those categories.
There's also a category, not in what I read, called for administrative expenses, which is up to 5% of the fund, can be used to pay for recording fees at the Registry of Deeds or surveys, so on and so on. So there is some little items that, like postage, that they could buy that's not a line item before town meeting, but town meeting has to appropriate the administrative expense, and advisory committee, I'm sure, will go over every line of every project to justify the expenditure. You don't have to spend the money in any year. You can hold it. And many communities do accumulate money. So there's a big amount of money there that they can go out and like buy land and be able to not have to borrow as much. So, I mean,
Okay.
I'm just telling you the law.
That's fine. No, that's
I'm not
good.
sure how I'm going to vote on this, and I'm thinking that maybe it makes sense after we hear this discussion to defer this for a little bit of time for people to think about it. Because a couple of the issues that we need to decide is, are we going to be looking for a 3% or a 2% or 1% surcharge?
But we don't
And-
have to decide that right now, right? So
You're going to have an article. As part of the article, you got to tell the voters what you're looking for.
yeah, but I mean, I guess my opinion is that to simply say, are we going to put it on the warrant or not? like, we don't have to have all of the details banged out before we put it on, do we?
We'll put what on the warrant?
So essentially, to to put in something on the warrant that says the town votes to adopt, the CPA law.
Well, that's why I'm saying, right now, Jeremy is saying that 275,000 a year is what we need, or what we would have spent. If you look at 275, backtrack it to what the revenue would be for Sherborn, you're looking at 1% as the amount of money for surcharge that we give you 275 per year. Is that the right number? I don't know if that's the right number, because that just talks about money that we would spend otherwise. But the whole point of the Community Preservation Act is to cause you to spend money on things that you wouldn't otherwise spend it on, most notably housing. It's intended to basically allow for an annual transfer to an affordable housing trust, so that the affordable housing trust can actually get some affordable housing built in a community that a community wouldn't otherwise do. So all of those things need to be thought about a little bit before you just go ahead and vote on this thing. And so my sense is there's going to be 2 votes yes, 2 votes no, and I'm going to not take a position because I want to think about it a little more. So that's why I'm saying, if it's going to end up being an inconclusive vote, why not put it off for to the next meeting?
I think that
I'd like
makes
to have a
sense
chance.
because we have to reopen the warrant. It's already closed anyway, so we can reopen it in 2 weeks instead of tonight.
Right. I basically want to have a conversation with Jeremy about some of the details here and figure out. I know you. I hear the comment that we don't need to decide all these things, but that's what the voters are going to look at. Is there going to be $100,000 exemption? And if you're gonna vote on $100,000 exemption, that means if you want to get more revenue, you have to go to 3%. But how much revenue do we really want? And another way to look at it is that we heard from advisory that we may be facing an override. And if we're going to have a 3% override versus a 3% surcharge, the surcharge in some ways is more efficient because it gives us a state subsidy for some of it, whereas the 3% is all on us as taxpayers. On the other hand, the 3% of an override can be used for anything, can be used for schools, can be used for technology, for
Yep.
all kinds of things, whereas you're limited on the CPA. So there's a lot of issues there that I think is worth.
Yeah. And
Not making it
we could end
immediate.
up having both also. We could end up doing a CPA and then also still having to do an override.
Yeah,
So
and
end
then you
up
got a
with-
6% increase in your
It's not-
taxes.
not a good proposition. So Eric, your hand's up.
Just to clarify discussion of something I said earlier, because I think it was a counter thing. Based on mass.gov, Department of Local Statistics, Sherborn has the 5th highest tax bill in the state. It goes Weston, Brookline, Lincoln, Wellesley, then Sherborn, Lexington, Concord, Dover, Belmont, Winchester. I'm not sure about Belmont and Winchester, but I know Sherborn by far has the lowest property values of those top 8. And I think this is just not something that we're in a position to do. And even though normally I have actually agreed to put things to the town, I think at this point, as select board members, I think that, at least for me as a select board member, I think it'd be irresponsible for me to put this before the town. I can't support one of those few things, because normally I'm pretty free about the things I support to go before a town meeting, but I think it'd be fiscally irresponsible to do so.
Okay. How do people feel about deferring the discussion for 2 weeks? And if those of you that are I still agree with Eric fully. So if you're in favor of doing this, then I would put the onus on you to work with Jeremy to draft something you want us to consider. I
Yeah,
don't
that's
think
fine. I
don't
can
think we have
withdraw my
anything.
motion to open the warrant.
I don't think I would have actually voted in favor of opening the warrant because I'm willing to allow you to open it, but I wouldn't support this article, I don't think. But it seems like it
I
makes
would vote,
sense.
I think,
Go
It's
ahead.
gonna
I
be
think the
two,
also, but then we'll actually have on the agenda, opening the warrant, consideration of this article, the article wording will be there, the public can see it. I think it's probably a
Yeah.
little bit better, to be honest with you, you know what I mean? Just to have it
Well,
spelled out and then people
And,
go
and
up
I
and
don't think we would allow it to maybe be a little more specific on the agenda, so people that have an interest might attend the meeting more so, because it just says CPA analysis. It doesn't say addition to the warrant or anything on
that's what
the
I'm thinking.
agenda.
And I will also vote to open the warrant. I definitely will support that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So Marion,
Yeah, I'll just say, I am leaning toward wanting to reconsider the CPA, but not thinking that it's necessarily the best thing for the town. I think we just don't know yet. And I personally would support anyone who wants to do the work and try to put this together. But I don't feel, I feel very far from being ready to present this to the town. So I think whatever gives us more time to consider it is a good idea.
so why don't we take some deliberation, and maybe it sounds like Stephen, maybe you're the best person to take the lead, and we can decide whether to put on the agenda 2 weeks from now with your input. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can work with Jeremy in the meantime and maybe put some details together.
Okay. Everyone okay with that plan? All right, thank you. That was
Thanks,
good.
Jeff. And that's timely in that we'll bring back on your next meeting, we'll actually have the warrant, more or less draft a wording for the board to consider as an agenda item.
Okay, good. That'll make it even better. Thanks, Jeremy. So, do you want to kick it off with the all the budget makers? Item 5 is the capital request.
Yes, sure. So we've got the budget makers here. I'm just going to share the summaries sheet here of the proposed capital for FY25, just so you get a sense of the overall. The board, we did discuss the overall 5-6 year capital plan in early December that had some, the draft request for FY25. So that was on a previous agenda, and that full capital plan is posted on the town's website. Since then, there has been some revisions to the requests for the spring town meeting. As summarized here, this is the current version of the requests and their status. The regional school capital has been deferred by the regional school, so there'll be no regional school capital at this town meeting. The Pine Hill cooling system, that's the school department is still doing a little work to fine tune their request. However, that is coming into shape. Don wanted the benefit of discussing the latest study findings with the school committee before putting forward the details, but there is that is coalescing to be a request on the order of magnitude of somewhere around $400,000. But that may get refined a little bit more based on a recent meeting with the facilities engineer that's doing the study. The police, fire, and public works items have been reviewed and approved by the capital budget committee over the last couple of weeks. The farm-based plan, the additional funds to complete that watershed study was also approved by the capital budget committee. The IT items were approved by the capital budget committee. I will say that a couple items for fire and a couple items for IT, the capital budget committee approved, however, with sort of the additional caveat that they're not technically capital items. They're sort of occasional equipment purchases, and requested that they be separate from the capital warrant article. And the capital budget committee is still reviewing the library space fit out for the Historical Society. They approved the Jameson Field 4 renovations for the rec committee, however, did not support the tennis and pickleball renovations. So that just wanted to set the table for you. All of the budget makers of these major projects are here. If you have questions or would like you to have them speak to their requests. All the background information's in your packet as far as the requests and quotes and so forth. So with that, I'll just turn it back to you, Jeff, and welcome any of the budget makers to present or be available for questions.
Can I ask a question before we get into the specifics?
Go ahead, Paul.
So the total requests are 3 million and change. What is the total number that we think we can afford? Is it like 1 million? Is it 2 million? Or is it 3 million? In other words, what is our overall target here? Are we trying to reduce these requests to what number does the capital committee think we should?
I'm answering that. Eric has his hand raised. I think the parties to answer that question, though, wouldn't be capital budget. They basically review things on a project by project basis. I think that would be an advisory answer, overall advisory, looking at the overall levy limit and capital budget. Having served on capital budget, typically just reviews each individual projects and decides whether it's justified. I don't think they look at the sort of aggregate impact on the tax rate and that kind of thing.
So has advisory given us a number?
I haven't seen anything. I don't know, Jeremy.
They have yet to discuss capital at advisory. I think their capital budget committee is just getting their recommendations completed, and like I mentioned, they still have the Pine Hill School to consider. So they don't have their final recommendations to advisory yet. But I have not heard an overall number from advisory as far as affordability of capital. Of that 3 million, approximately a little over 300,000 we would recommend be funded by free cash. The balance would be exempt borrowing.
And
Well,
what about,
notably, the two projects that they didn't decide on, the library fit out and the Jameson pickleball, total around 1.5 million. So they actually total in the neighborhood of half of the total package.
is there a possibility of earmarks? I mean, there is a possibility of earmarks. Have we considered that, or grants on this? I mean, before we get to hearing all the details of all these projects, I'm trying to get a sense of what is our goal here to achieve what number?
I think that would be an advisory, like Dan Sickle, an advisory team recommendation to us would be my suggestion. Because the capital budget has 3 members, capital budget committee has 3 members, one of whom is an advisory board member also. So they integrate. And the capital budget typically is looking at each project to make sure they've got, either 3 quotes for the cost, or that it's an item that's on the state approved bidding list for a vehicle, for example. And they maybe look at the economics of replacing something if it's a case where it's a vehicle and you're looking at high maintenance costs. So the replacement is due to increased maintenance expense versus the capital costs. Whereas advisory will look at the integrated financial perspective, I would say, of the overall capital improvement budget in aggregate.
So this is just a listening session and to understand what all the projects are and deferring judgment on.
That would be my characterization of it. That's just me personally, though. So we have 2 other hands raised. Eric, I think yours was up first, and then Marion.
I mean, just to kind of address call. I know advisories has looked at this, but ultimately we, for the things that fall into the Board of Selectmen, are asking advisory for it. If that makes any sense. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing, as where advisory makes an opinion. But remember, anything that's not free cash here is going to be 2.5 override. It's going to be bonded, and we're going to go to the public, ask for 2.5 override. So to answer your question, Paul, we can afford it all. what do you want your taxes to be? You know, I miss George Morrill so much when every year he would tell you, you know, if you don't want to pay the taxes, don't spend the money. There's three
Yeah.
things on here which I'm not going to support for that exact reason, because all these things are for 2.5 override. So all these things are going to cost the taxpayers money for it. I don't know how else to say that, but what you can afford is subjective. If it wasn't an override and it went in the levy, then the question what we can afford makes sense.
Yeah.
Because then you can actually say, okay, well, what's within our cap? But these capital things, that's kind of like, I don't know how else to call it. I'm sure Steven's going to shoot me down, but it's almost like a fake budget. It's just, what do you want? How much do you want your taxes to go up? That's really what it is. You know, maybe you could have someone do an analysis and tell you how much the taxes to go up, but it's $3 million. That's all, most of which is going to be under and going to be with an override exemption. And it's going to be sitting on top of the 2.5 that we're always sitting at with basically no levy space whatsoever.
So most of
Uh,
my towns do their borrowings within the levy limit.
I know we have
Sherborne's
this
like
conversation every year, Paul, and I got to get George Morrow on this. I want to recognize George Morrow. I'm going to come to this call and recognize, because he's told you every year for like 6 years that if you don't want to pay the taxes, don't spend the money, because they're all overrides. They all are. You've known that. You've been doing this since 1995. You've been in this town since the 80s. Every capital expenditure, for some reason, is not within the levy limit here. So every one of these is going to cost the taxpayers money.
That's what I got. You guys have made your points. Stephen, you can intervene, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm end up gonna just supplement what Eric said. I did a very, very rough, blunt calculation just using the state's debt service calculator. So $3 million if we assume 3.5% and in 20 years. And obviously it's not going to be super accurate because not everything on here is going to be, 20 years. But you're looking at averaging $211,000 per year on debt service for every year for the next 20 years. And assuming, again, another blunt tool I like to use, which is that about every $15,000 of the budget is a penny on the tax rate. So that ends up being about 16.5 pennies on the tax rate every year for the next 20 years. So that's roughly what you're talking about for $3 million.
Okay, so I
Thank-
think you can probably
appreciate
unshare Jeremy now. I think we've covered the topic as much as we can tonight, is my sense. We need to get advisory and capital budget to take a better look at this. And I think that obviously those two projects that capital budget didn't vote on, I think they need to think about further, as do we. The one thing I
All
will,
those
Go ahead.
people are here, Jeff. Why don't we hear from them?
well,
They-
I'm not sure that they're prepared tonight. They're here. I don't see, Dan Sickle can't be here.
No, I mean all the department heads. I thought the agenda item said that when
They're here, but I think they've submitted their budget. I don't think it would be a worthwhile, and I'm open to people disagreeing with me, but I don't think it would be a worthwhile discussion without having advisory and capital budget here simultaneously, who don't appear to be here.
But
okay.
shouldn't we, like, isn't it because it's our capital budget? All these fall under the board. Shouldn't we have some discussion whether we want the merits of them? Maybe, putting aside, policy, how much it'll cost and units, whatever, just talk about the merits of them a little bit, because it is kind of our capital budget we're proposing to advisory. Does that make sense?
Well,
if it's a
yes
brief
and no,
discussion.
like, I mean, technically, I don't think the recreation reports to us do it. They would be separate entity. I don't think the schools don't report to us, so they're not really all our budget.
Still, though, to some degree, do we as select board, do we take a vote on each capital item in the capital improvement plan each year?
Eventually later.
Yeah,
But I
I don't
mean, so
think,
I think this is kind of like the information gathering stage, right? Where we kind of want to find out, well, tell us more about each of these projects, because it'll help to inform our decision as to whether or not we're going to support the project later on in the season,
well,
right?
and I think the reason for having capital budget here is they've done analysis of all but two of them, and so that we could have them discuss their analysis too. I don't think it's going to be as effective without them being here. It may end up being repetitive if we have to do it 2 weeks from now or later with them present. Because they're going to vote. Advisory will, as you know, advisory will also vote on this at their public hearing, but usually they have a pretty good sense before the public hearing of where they're coming down on these.
But if I could, Jeff,
Go ahead, Paul, please.
just to respond to Stephen a little bit. We have a warrant article that says here are the capital projects for the upcoming year, and it's like A through F. And we do have a board meeting in which we consider each item A through F that we put on the warrant, and we do take votes. Do we want this item on the warrant? It's the first vote, and then the second vote is later, do we support this item? So we do need to know what these items are, and we do need to be familiar with the comparative priority between the two. If one item is a high priority item and the other one is a very low priority item and we can't do both, we got to make a decision, and we need the information to make that decision. So there is some fact finding that needs to be done. When that's done, we have until before advisory, by the time we issue the warrant before advisory, to have these discussions. It doesn't have to be tonight. I was just saying, if they're here anyway, listening to them is just whether we want to spend the time.
I might be agreeing with Paul. I'm not sure. I just think for the things that fall in the select board, we have to make an opinion. We can't just have them go to advisory without us making an opinion. Do you know what I mean? We can't just be like, tell us advisory.
I agree with that, but I would like our opinion to reflect the advisory and capital budget input in addition to the budget makers' input. They may have points that we haven't thought of. So I would rather not discuss them because those two entities are not present. But that doesn't mean, I think it's not the right approach, but if the select board feels differently, then we can discuss them.
I guess I just feel like in past years, I mean, this is my first year on select board, but on advisory, I don't believe that we ever came into a select board meeting to discuss the capital items. We always just had, each of the budget makers come and present their capital, and then, eventually at the advisory public hearing that, everybody would be present and we would all discuss. But prior to that, I don't feel like we ever had a group discussion with the select board and capital budget committee about each of the items. I feel like each committee kind of did their own separate diligence on the items.
Yeah, well, maybe that's true. I remember it the same way, but I feel like we would make our discussion more robust if we had their input and their analysis. In other words, we could then end up at the advisory public hearing having several different viewpoints, I guess I would say, if we hadn't factored in some factors that need to be considered. But Marianne, your hand's up.
Well, I was just going to say that I agree with what all of you have said. I don't think we're ready to take any vote on any of these tonight, but it is an opportunity to hear from these people and to ask some questions. So we might go down the list and see which one. Well, do we have someone here that's a champion of that particular item? And then is there anything that we want to ask to fill in our own knowledge about it?
I'm not trying to interrupt, Aaron. Maybe it's on top of what you're saying there. If you're looking to streamline it, you could just simply ask the board, is there anything that does concern you? Because a lot of these are easy. I have this feeling that, for example, the turnout gear and equipment, like no one's going to do it. I don't have to hear, not that I don't like hearing from Zach, but I don't have to hear him talk for 10 minutes about it, 'cause I'm pretty sure no one's going to, protest that. Who knows? But there's 3 things here that I'm concerned about, and I don't know if you want to do something stream like that. We can mention if we're concerned about something and it's something that we're not fully sure about that would support just based on, the background material that's before us or, anything else like that. Again, that might help to streamline it. Or even if we simply mention it so the budget preparers can be ready for it. I don't know.
And that's exactly what I was trying to say, Eric. Thank
Yeah.
you.
All
I would be
right.
in
Really,
favor of that approach
presentation
as
is
well.
something we all know we're going to support. Mhm.
All right, it sounds like people are in favor of that approach. So I'm assuming since they've deferred or have question marks, the schools will not be discussed. So do we want to do the police first? Does that make sense? If you want to just have each of them go through their items? Does that?
Well, maybe
Yeah.
we could just ask select board, are there any of these categories that you particularly want to know more about, to understand or question or challenge?
Yeah, I'd like to hear what Eric had, and I had some. He's probably the same as his, but let's hear. He's dangled that in front of us. I'm very curious. what
Eric
it's-
very obviously wants to talk about a few specific things, so I say let's just give him the floor and ask clear questions, Eric.
Read-
I mean, the three that I had, and I think, roadway management, library fit out space, and Jameson Field pickleball. And Jameson Field, is that one being withdrawn? Or is that one that didn't get supported? Is that being withdrawn? Someone remind me.
That's correct. Capital budget did not support the pickleball tennis court renovation.
Okay, that was good. But it's not withdrawn, it's still proposed. Okay. Those are three which I just would have some discussion.
Yeah, those are my three also. So do people want to hear from the non-three, the other departments, what's included? Right now, what Eric proposed was Public Works for only one of their projects, and then library, and then Jameson Field. Is there people that want to hear any background on the items other than those three?
I don't think so. Not me.
Paul?
I'm good. Those were the same items that I was
And
curious about.
Marion, you're okay with that too, if we focus on those three?
Yes.
All right, so why don't we let Sean go first and we can talk about roadway management? Is that all right, Sean? Where are you?
Yes. As a
Hey.
presenter, I can just point the question where we go. It's up to him.
Yeah, that's fine.
Say that again. Ask that again. I'm sorry, I didn't hear very well.
I said I can present from the start, or we can just roll right into your question.
I'm fine. I'll start with a question. So, and I'll tell you. So, I obviously support road management. Every single it's done, and I applaud Sean for making good use of the town's resources, particularly with the roadway management that's been done. I have a couple concerns. One, we ask for it every single year, and at some point, does something actually effectively become operating? I know Jeff pointed out rightfully so that when you bond something over the lifespan of the project, it makes it fair because future residents, have partial ownership of it, so on and so forth. But if you're asking for something literally every single year, it almost loses point, the whole capital side of things. There's some flexibility when you can spend money. And frankly, we didn't care when interest rates were 2%, but now we care a bit more because actually it's more than the operating funds there. It's more than a cost than the operating. The second thing is we know that we haven't spent a lot. There's been other things going on. We haven't spent much, if any, of the previous year. And I know we could probably crank it in the next 6 months and spend a bunch of money, but that's kind of not the point. And obviously I've taken over George Morrow and being the fiscally conservative one in the group here. And I just think that with the interest rates being high right now, even though who knows when you bond it all together, it might be different. And I know you can refinance it. I get all that. Given the fact that we've appropriated and spent funds, almost every single year, given also the fact that we're supposed to only do this theoretically a limited number of years, because then once you get the overall roadway system improved enough, you can almost maintain it on Chapter 90, almost. And given just how tight we are with the levy, even though these are not levy items this year, I would support deferring roadway management this year, with the intent of resuming it perhaps in 25. And I know there's work to be done out there, and I know I'm probably screwing myself because someone actually, I know Sean told me that maybe my street was next, and it probably won't be now. My neighbors will hate me.
Except for the probably part, that's right.
I actually, would support deferring the roadway management this year And the stormwater one upsets me because I don't want to spend it, but I know it's necessary, and I know we got to start making structural BMPs, and I know we're not getting credit for stuff that's outside the NIPD's area there, and I'd much rather defer that one just philosophically, but I just know we can't. And so I would actually, take that. I think it was like 400 we have currently available, I think, in authorization. Take that, spend it throughout the summer. Plus, if we're doing the roundabout next year too, it's going to be a lot of work, a lot of diversions. There's no reason to cram it all in. I think we should take a pause in our roadway management capital requests. That's my thought.
Yeah, and I would just echo that because of the roundabout, in terms of also the project work that the department will be managing. If we're really doing whatever it is, $1+ million roundabout, it's a lot of work to get done in 1 year.
So I had a question, follow up on that.
Sure, Paul.
So the state's promising us additional revenue. So the chapter 90, then they're gonna add this extra money, like another 125,000 or so. Have you factored in the 125, and would that reduce this 250 to 125, half of it? Sean?
So we have, let me respond to the whole thing. And some of this, I gotta set the stage. As everybody knows, I always keep a little bit of money in my pocket for things like culverts that collapse, stormwater structures that collapse, because it's not in my budget. There's no money in my budget. We can fill potholes with the money that's in the budget and fix a couple of fence posts. That's about it. It's always been on the capital side. So a couple of years ago, we basically ponied up 2 years worth of chapter 90 and a little over a year's worth of capital article. We did Woodland Street. Woodland in the short stretch of Goulding was $1 million. So we came out of that project with zero in the bank. Last year we were on the cuff of having enough funding for the roundabout. We had to sit on it till we found out how that was going to shake out. By the time that shook out, it was fall. And unless you live under a rock, you understand what last year looked like. We've had 4, if not 5, 25-year storms, maybe a couple of 50-year storms in 1 calendar year. We've done massive damage to the infrastructure that we own. We don't know that all of the damage that we've done. We barely saved Coolidge Street culvert, but we know that at the end of Eric's driveway, there's a massive stormwater problem that's going to keep us from probably paving that road this year. We went on like a 5-year spree of going out and going. I went on a 5-year spree of trying as fast as we could to save some roads that were going to hit the threshold of full rebuild. The intent was to try to do that again. We quickly got to the point where, all right, there's a couple of stormwater issues that have now turned into stormwater/icing issues, which again, we usually see 1-2 storms a year, maybe every other year, that cause icing. We've had people that have icing in front of their house for the past month and a half. There's nothing I can do about it except throw salt at it and hope it goes away. We're gonna have to fix some of those issues, and they're not cheap. They're much more expensive than throwing chip seal down on a halfway decent road. So we're gonna have to start plopping some stormwater structures in. There's legal work that has to go because we may need easements. And all of that goes in front of paving a road. So it looks like there's a lot of money. 250,000 sounds like a lot of money. That won't do Snow Street. It won't. So you got to combine that with the 150 that came through. So there's a lot of unknowns that we didn't have 18 months ago. We came off a year that didn't have significant storms to a year that's had more significant storms than anyone can remember. So there's a lot of work to be done. And that doesn't address just the aging infrastructure all over town. So there's potholes, there's constant potholes in the neighborhoods. All of the neighborhoods are going to suffer because we're not addressing the neighborhoods. Cider Hill is going to get worse. Ward Park Jackson has potholes that would, almost swallow a car. Some of those roads are going to slip because we have to address stormwater. We have to address icing issues. Anyone that's driven down Whitney Street anytime in the past month has noticed that there's just water running down the road and freezing all night long, every night. So those are issues that we used to see once in 5 years, maybe once in 10 years. Now it's constant. So I'm not a huge climate change alarmist, but we have to address some issues that we thought were in the past back in the 70s and 80s when we used to have severe winters. Now we have severe storms coming through in winter. So for those reasons, I would strongly urge you not even consider pulling back on the funding.
Okay, thanks for the input. Any,
What about the extra state funds? Did you factor that in?
What's that, Paul?
What about the extra state funds that are coming your way under the formula for Chapter 90?
It's still, it's less than half of what we're asking for. So yeah, it's factored in. It'll help us possibly hit the threshold of being able to make a project. Again, it's not like we're sitting with $2 million to try to pave a whole bunch of streets. We're talking only a couple $100,000. That doesn't go very far when we start putting stormwater structures in the ground. It's great that we have it, and we need it.
For the roundabout, we had that special town meeting. We approved the roundabout because you said you're going to do the bidding around January 1st. Has the bidding come in as projected, or is it higher or lower, or what? Where are we on?
The roundabout's under contract. We have an existing contract, and that's been awarded. That didn't go up for public bid. We have a contract for roadway management that fit that.
So we're on budget.
Correct. We have that budget. We have a notice to proceed to begin that work. The long lead items are being ordered. You know, they're being procured now through Lynch.
granite, yeah.
Yeah, granite is the issue. As odd as that might sound, we live in New England, but that's the long lead time item.
Do you see any need for additional funding for that project?
Not for that project, no, sir.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on roadway management? All right, so the next one of the three is the library space fit out, and I don't know, Martha and George are here. I don't know if you want to take the lead, George, or
Yes, why don't I? Thank you, Jeff.
Sure.
So let me, if I may,
Yeah.
give a
and
brief-
Margot. I didn't forget Margot either, but go ahead. Sorry.
Margot is here and Brian Connolly is here. Brian chairing the library board, and Brian worked very closely with Margot, Martha, and me since for the last several years. And Jeff, in the earlier period, you were very much involved as well. So you should have, I submitted to the select board members, and I know Jeremy has it, a few documents. One is a narrative that we prepared for you to just sort of give you an idea of where we are and what it is that we're seeking. Another document is a fairly detailed timeline for the Historical Society since it was first formed in 1911 up until today, and the significant events that have taken place over that time frame, which essentially have had implications for where we were housed. And in a nutshell, but I think you perhaps already know this, the town was fortunate enough in 1914 to receive a gift from William Bradford Homer Dowse, who was a very prominent local resident. And of course, that's had a few different lives of its own now. But at the time when the gift was made, it was determined that his request was that the town provide a home for the recently incorporated Historical Society for the town. So anyway, I won't bother to go through all of that with you, but we've worked with the library trustees quite closely. We've looked at some alternatives have been considered for a home. It really came down to a strong desire, and that was suggested by the town as well, that we should somehow be housed in the library. And of course, there are complications with that, but there is a way to do it. And we were persuaded to hire an architectural firm, two architects who work together. And we began in earnest last summer, I think it was, putting together a plan. And this was really just almost a feasibility plan to get us to move through this project as quickly as we can. We've been really in hibernation since June of 2020. More recently, we've spent a good deal of time talking with Sean as well. And I think I would say that not only do we hope to have our new home, we want to have a new home, but we'd like to have it as soon as we possibly can. And with that in mind, we came up with a plan. The town hired CHA, that's an estimating firm that you may be familiar with. Sean certainly is. And they are the ones who came up with the proposal that you see. And the idea was to try to bundle the cost of hiring the architects who would provide the detailed drawings and still have enough money based upon CHA's estimations that we could move from one effort to the other, meaning we would have authorization and money available to hire the architects, go out to bid, get the architects, get their work done, so that we can then turn right around in the process and go out to bid with a contractor to do the work necessary. I've met with the Capital Budget Committee twice now, and we've had good meetings with them. I think they are supportive of what it is we're trying to do, but there were questions in their mind, and I think to some degree in mine as well, in terms of better understanding the numbers that are included in that CHA assessment. There also is a good deal of concern. You know, it is as was referred to as a big nut this year to think in terms of a number that's between 900 and $1 million that the town would be asked to pony up. So we are of the mind at this point that and that I should work with Jeremy and with Sean to come up with an appropriate number that would not be the 922 number. It would be an amount needed to hire, to go out to bid, to get some architects in and get them going so that we can have the designs in place for the time at which we would come back to the town and ask for a number to pay for that bill of construction. So it slows things down, but I think it gives people a little more comfort that we will be doing it methodically. One of the things that I said, and I think everybody can appreciate this, that I certainly don't want to be in a position of asking the town for a big hunk of money to do a worthwhile project, but nonetheless come back at a later date and say, you know, we need another umpty-ump dollars to finish the project. Nobody wants to see that. You don't, I don't. So we think we're going to just take it a little slower. Hate to do it, but I think it'll everybody will take a little more comfort if we just take our time and do it right. So we do want to submit a number. Our plan is to go back to the Capital Budget Committee. It'll be a number that I think we'll feel confident in, that will be the amount of money necessary to get architects in place and get going.
Okay, thanks, George. I just want to add one thing to what you said, which is that unlike some projects which we can ask the voters to decide yay or nay on, because of the 1914 agreement, we're required, the town committed in perpetuity to house the museum somewhere in town. So default option is not doing nothing. That we are required to provide space, and you've moved many times from the original library to the second floor town hall to the basement of town hall to Gentle Giant in Quincy. So we've moved several times, but the default option is not zero. The default option is we have to provide space somewhere that's suitable for a historical museum with artifacts that require preservation and the ability to have it accessible to the residents to share. So that's something the town committed to when their Dallas Library was donated. So I just want to point that out. Did you want to correct anything I misstated, George?
No, you're correct. That's hopefully that's reflected in the materials I gave you, but you might have stated it a little better than I did. So
I
thank
just
you, Jeff.
no, I just wanted it to also be in the record. So Marion.
Right, yeah, of course, I'm totally supportive that the library finally will have a home, that the Historical Society finally will have the home that it has deserved and not had for a long time. I have just a couple of points. One is that whenever an architect is hired to do a design of something, a house or a space, you have to really be careful that they understand that there's a construction budget that you have to keep in mind, and you don't know exactly what that budget will be. But you know, I've had the experience of architects just being given a project and designing the best thing they possibly could because they're architects. That's what they do. But it would be good if the library group and George and your collaborators in this could communicate to the architect that the town has limited funds and can they do the best design that is workable for you and that they would be proud of, but with a budget in mind. I'm sure.
Mary, we did spend with the other architects. We came up with a plan. Basically, we have a plan of what works, and that we've been pleased with that. We've I think a number of people have collaborated on that, and so I recognize, you certainly want to be cognizant of expenses. There's no question. We've already cut out some extraneous piece that was in there we didn't know anything about, but nonetheless. So there is the planning phase has been done, the conceptual plan is done, and the architect is really providing the detail to align itself with the plans that we've already done. But we're not looking for gold plating anything for sure. But we were assured that we would have a good home with finishes that would be commensurate with the finishes that you see in the library. Now, I wouldn't concern yourself with that the library is very nicely done. We don't want to be left in a situation where we're really in an unfinished basement area right now, and there are a lot of things that need to be taken into account to convert that to a workable space, but it can be done. And I recognize that we all need to be cognizant of what the expense is, and I can't tell you in the end what that's likely to be. I think Sean might have a better handle on those kinds of things than I, and he also understands some of the infrastructure issues that need to be dealt with.
Right. And the second part of my question is, this seems like the perfect subject for grant applications. And so could you tell us about what grants you're looking for and how that may supplement this?
Well, that was raised at capital budget as well, and we did look at some prospective grants through the Massachusetts Cultural Council this past fall, and there were some that are the due dates are about now, I think, to have for submittal, but we did not qualify. Each one was different purpose, but we did not qualify for any of those grants. We do, we're keeping our eyes open. We're communicating with other organizations. We're aware. We want to make ourselves aware of any grant opportunities that come along. But you know, the onus of doing this is not just on the Historical Society. It's on all of us, because we're to have a home. We've been told where we ought to be. We think it's a good solution. The plans that we have, such as they are now, are very good. It will be something that I think the town and we can be proud of. But that doesn't. But at the same token, we know we need to get it paid for. And if there are some grant opportunities out there, we certainly want to try to pursue those.
Good, thanks.
Any other select board questions or comments?
I mean, just a quick comment, just, I think we all know this, I think it's a good idea maybe to break this up a little bit, because there's gonna be some obvious political sensitivity, and frankly, I think it'll be just, when I initially brought up, a hard sell to ask for an item this big, especially the biggest on the schedule here, for anything with the word library next to it. It's just the way it is. There's a lot of sensitivity to that, and you know, that was one of my main concerns why I brought it up as well. I think there's a good chance that this request, as it is, would not pass town meeting. You know, so even if we all like it and everything else, there's a good chance it wouldn't get to 2/3.
Well, what do you mean, the full amount, or the what I'm talking about in terms of getting architectural plans?
No, the full amount. The full amount. That's why I brought it up. That's why I called out. That's why I said it's good that you kind of break it up. It's
Yeah,
good to kind of do your revised
Yeah, and I would also say that's I have been persuaded of that as well. And capital budget feels the same way.
I have a question.
Paul, go ahead, yes.
So in the historic timeline, it says that the museum had 700 square feet, but in the big proposal, you're talking about 1,800 feet being set aside. And of that 1,800 feet, the architects have put together a museum program of 1,756 square feet, which is 1,000 more feet than you had back 20 years ago. Do you need all that space?
Yeah, we actually had more than that. Paul, I know there's reference to that in a town meeting that's why we included it in that timeline. We've had more space than that. We also were looking, frankly, we were looking at the entire unfinished space in the library, but we've in negotiating with the library board have consolidated that to 1,800 out of a larger space for a couple of reasons. But not the least of which is the library itself needs to have some unfinished storage space. And the plan that we have accommodates that. There was a vote that we got from the library board of trustees a year, or I don't remember, I'd have to look up when it was. It should be, I think, in the timeline, but there was a vote by the library trustees to provide us up to 1,800 square feet. And I think the number is slightly under that. And that's the number we've been working with. And, you know, the other thing to be said, and I think you can look back at the amount of square footage we had in our original location, was relative to the size of the library itself, was at least a quarter of the library space. And if you go back to day one, so, you know, organizations grow. I think, you know, you could never have too much space, but we felt that it was workable. I frankly, we have a plan which I'd like to show you that shows how the space is divided into a curator's room, which we had at the town office building, a space for our archival products, and also a fairly good sized space for our museum. And as you may recall, the museum space we had at the town office building was, fairly substantial size. We've also been fortunate enough to use outside the last space that we had in the lower level of the town office building. We also used the corridor there and the entryway. So yes, the 700 was alluded to back in whatever year that was, back, I think, in the early 80s. But it's a different day.
Yeah, no, the space, just to clarify too, George, the space in the basement of Town Hall, which they took over when the police station moved out, when we built the police station, was around 1,550 square feet.
Yeah.
So they were in 1,550 most recently when they went into storage. We moved them into storage because we were worried in COVID, as you well know, about having to spread people out in Town Hall because we were being limited to 2 people per workroom, and we had 7 people in the land use office, or 8 people. So we moved them out in case we had to disperse town employees. And I think it makes more sense because we now have an integrated land use office in the basement that
Yes.
used to be spread out over different areas. But they were in just barely under 1,600 square feet previously. So this isn't much of an increase.
Yeah. Two other comments. One is that our collection is far larger today than it was in 1914. Things grow, and we've been fortunate enough to add to our collection. We've also done a fair amount of deaccessioning, those things that we didn't think were necessary or appropriate for our collection. But the collection has grown substantially, and we have been working pretty diligently over the last several years. It's been 2 years now that we, both Martha and Margot and others, have been utilizing about 1,000 square feet in my office building, going through our documents, putting things in order, going through photographs. They've been working pretty hard for 2 years, even though we've been in hibernation. They haven't been. They've been working hard and getting lots of good work done in this intervening period.
I'll just make one other comment, which is, as a lawyer, I'm very sensitive to the fact that we have an obligation to this museum. And the town ought to meet its obligations. So I, for one, am committed to finding a way to have this museum back functioning and a benefit to the community, in part because of all these commitments that you've cited in the paperwork that you provided, but also because it's good for the community. So notwithstanding the fact that it's in the library and this association with the library, I think the library issues are going to get resolved, and the public is going to move on from that issue. So ultimately, I think everything's going to work out.
And I would add one more bullet to that, is that this is particularly important because it's our 350th celebration also. So the history is actually even more relevant because of that. All right. Thank you, George.
So we're obviously happy to meet with you again, and we will certainly get a new number to you that will be more reflective of just the cost of hiring architects to get going on the project.
Okay.
Good.
Sounds good. So the only other item that we wanted to discuss, I think, is the Jameson pickleball court, and Dave's here, I think. Are you going to discuss that, Dave?
Yeah, sure. So they're 2 different capital projects. One is for Jameson 4, and one is for the tennis courts and pickleball courts. So I guess I don't know which one you had questions about, or which ones you want me to address.
I didn't sense that people were questioning the Jameson 4. Am I correct about that? Does anyone want to hear more details on Jameson Field 4?
I was questioning the pickleball tennis, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. So I can go into that. I don't know if you play tennis or if you've been to the tennis courts. Those courts
I don't even know when they were built. We've tried to figure out how old they actually are. Prior to me joining REC 7 years ago, there was a project that resurfaced them. Basically, there were cracks. One of the things you can do, obviously, with the courts is you can sort of surface over those cracks, and you're going to get some life out of them for a little while. We're at that point where those cracks are starting to show again, and they're pretty serious at this point. As well as we know we need work on the fences. The fences are curling up. The people that are there, we've tried to put in makeshift fixes for the fence where it's curling up. If you play pickleball there, you'll see very quickly you get close to the edges of the fence and potentially close enough to cut yourself or whatnot. Generally, those, like I said, those courts are at the point where they need to be redone. The last couple of years has gotten worse. I will say we were fortunate 2 years ago. It was a fairly dry year. A lot of water didn't there wasn't that much water that got in there, but if you look at it over the past year, because we've had a wet year, those cracks are starting to get bigger. And it's just going to get to the point where they're not playable or they're not safe. So it's a project that has to get done at some point if we want to continue to maintain the integrity of the tennis courts. This is also an opportunity. We know that pickleball is picking up pretty significantly in town. There is contention for time on the courts. And the backboard that's there, which again is also in disrepair, is an opportunity to replace that and put a couple pickleball courts there. The incremental cost for the pickleball is actually relatively minor. The other thing I will mention is that we know, and this has been in the open spaces plan for quite a while now, is that neither the backboard, the tennis courts, or the Jameson 1 facility is ADA accessible. And this is an opportunity to fix that as well. So part of the plan is to provide not only more handicap parking over at Jameson, but also to provide walkways for that, essentially to bring it up to ADA compliance.
Okay. So are there any select board questions or requests for more details?
I mean, I'll look at,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
Oh,
Marion.
yes.
We'll let Marion go, then you can go, Eric.
I may have missed this, Dave, but did you have a breakdown of the various components of that plan and the cost of each? Do we have that?
Yeah, that's in the packet.
I got it. Okay.
Find the page. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have a rendering of what the site would look like. We hired a landscape architect to come in. They gave us a couple of proposals. This was the one that the Recreation Commission felt was the most appropriate. And then based off of that proposal, they gave us a breakdown of what they believe the costs would be. And that's essentially what was put in there for the number. That's 656, if I'm correct on the number.
I've got it. Thank you.
Yep.
No matter what component of this you get enough money for, I really commend you adding the walkways for ADA accessibility, because that's been part of the open space plan and the recreation plan for a long time now. It's one of the only places that we can do anything ADA, and so it's an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and the tennis courts are kind of unique in terms of our facilities. They're really used by all age groups. I mean, it's not uncommon to see little kids all the way through seniors using it. They're used year round. They're used night and day. So from a community usage perspective, it actually encompasses a wide swath of individuals. So again, we want to ensure that A, it's safe, and B, that it's accessible to everybody.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering whether we get any revenue from the use of these facilities that might help pay for some of the borrowing costs. Do we charge for the use of the tennis courts, for example?
We charge for lessons. That's the only thing. If Bob Clausen gives lessons, those are charged for. We get a small percentage of that, not significant. In terms of just the public use, no, they're open to the public, Sherborn residents, first come, first serve basis.
So if somebody from Natick got in their car and drove down to Sherborn and played in the tennis courts, they get it for free.
Yeah, I mean, unless we wanted to somehow enforce that, we have talked about putting a reservation system in place. We've kind of held off. I know that if we built the 2 pickleball courts, I'm sure it would be very popular. We'd probably want to move to a reservation system where if you're a resident, maybe we offer it for free and you get an hour. If you're if you're not a resident, maybe there is an opportunity to gain some revenue if we felt like that was appropriate. But as of right now, I can just tell you historically what we've done is it has been open, and it kind of is on the honor system in terms of who's playing there. There are signs that say for residents only, but we don't have the capacity to enforce anything beyond just putting signage up.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that is if I go by and all 4 courts are used, I go to Natick High School to play. So I don't want you to get me in trouble, Paul.
I got to report you to Natick.
I don't know.
So there is no significant revenue opportunity here to help pay for some of this borrowing. Is what I get.
And probably not significant enough if we were to put some sort of fee for use. My guess is that would go towards just maintenance in general. I don't think it's going to make a dent in really the capital costs we've got to put forward to redo them.
And it's really something that the residents, are receiving as a value for their taxes also. They sort of are already paying. As opposed to like a league that is like sometimes on our soccer fields, we have leagues that rent the field. That's a little bit different. So I think, Stephen, your hand was the first one that was up.
Yeah, I guess my question, Dave, is what would happen if we deferred this for a year or two? Like, are we going to get into a horrible deterioration, unusable court situation, or is it something that could get deferred? My thought is, I don't know if you were here for the Community Preservation Act discussion that we were having earlier.
Yep.
And that has only lukewarm support from the board, I think, but on the off chance that does go to town meeting and it passed, this is something that CPA funds could be used for. So rather than committing to it this early, I was thinking that maybe waiting a year or two to see if CPA passes might be a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we just face the potential for them to deteriorate further. I mean, and then that's just the risk we, have to take, right? There's always the chance that they become unplayable. We may have to close a court or whatnot. But in talking about it on the rec commission, I suppose right now, given the shape that they're in, we still have some control over when we do it. At some point, we may not have any control over when it happens because we'll have to do it. So it's really just a risk calculation in terms of like, how long do we want to defer it before we're forced to do it, maybe in conditions that might not be ideal.
Okay, Marion, I think, had her hand up first.
All right, I just have sort of a timing thing. It's a big overall budget, and it's got a lot of moving parts. And I'm just wondering if you, in your own mind, have prioritized these needs. That is, some of them say could wait while others are being done. For example, the repaving of the tennis courts alone is a huge chunk of this. And other costs are a little bit lower. There's a lot of demolition and site preparation that I think is mostly connected to the tennis courts. So if you had to prioritize, if you got, say, a half or a third of this money, what would you do with it?
I don't think we, to be fair, I'm not sure we could do it. We would have much to do with half of it. The main project is to resurface the tennis courts. And unfortunately, that's a thread that once you start pulling on, creates all
It's
of
a
these
big-
other things. You know, the fence is $80,000, right? So if you resurface the tennis courts, you got to put a fence back up. And we know if we disturb the grounds, that those poles, the light poles, are most likely going to have to be replaced. And so it all sort of snowballs from there. So I don't know. Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, we've talked about it a bunch in terms of how can we segment this and try and do it in pieces. There's not anything significant that we've come up with where we can say, all right, well, let's do half here and then we can do the rest later. Once you start resurfacing the tennis courts, I think everything else has to sort of fall from there.
Well, I actually had the same question. I know you had your hand up, Eric, but mine's a follow-on question. My thinking was one possible way to break it up was, what if you just built the pickleball courts where the backboard is now? And by doing that, you're putting less wear and tear on the tennis courts, and it's inconvenient because the pickleballs have to sort of adjust the court. If we did the pickleball courts, and there's a lot of users there where the backboard currently is, we would then go a period of time with no backboard, I realize, because you're going to put the backboard on the regular one of the regular tennis courts. But that might be one way to do something, and it would, well, it doesn't get at the tennis issue. There seems to be so much popularity with pickleball, it might be worth accelerating it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the tail wagging the dog a little bit, because I mean, if
Yeah.
we want to do a pickleball courts, we could do pickleball courts independently. I think that
Yeah,
the project is the issue with the tennis courts, and we basically get the pickleball courts for a very, very small incremental cost beyond
yeah.
that. So
But you show
yeah,
some
I think
progress,
you're just
yeah,
deferring the problem with the tennis courts, and
absolutely.
kind of goes back to what Stephen was saying, which is like, is this something that has to happen now?
Yep. All right, I'm going to let Eric and then Sean go.
Well, just about the deferments, because we're talking about deferring possibly a couple things here. I think I know we saw it a little while ago. I guess maybe it's to Jeremy, I'm not sure, is let's look at what this would do to our 5-year out plan to defer some things. I know, we try to even out our debt service. What would that do if we were to defer this? Would it defer something in FY 26 to 27, 27 to 28? I know we can't just defer everything and have a huge FY 26. I would like to kind of take a decent look at this. If we deferred, let's say, like most of the library and all the pickleball, what would that do? And I'd like to take a look at that, because I do agree that the tennis pickleball probably has to get done eventually. This is just a tough year. It's a tough year financially, and capital doesn't line up with operational. You know what I mean? Yeah, an FY 25 capital. By the time you actually do the work and then bond, and then you do the notes and then you bond it, it's almost like an FY 27 operating. But it's still a tough year to ask for a fair amount of money this year. It really is. So
It
again,
is,
maybe
with
that was
one exception, though. I was going to interrupt you, that we're deferring all the regional school, the turf, track, field, the Lindquist HVAC, all that's actually deferred also already. So those are probably going to be next year or the year after.
that might change my mind. I would like maybe to look at the 5-year plan.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I'm
No,
very about those 5-year plans until they really need to capture anything. There should be no excuse
yeah,
next year. If we see something that's not on the 5-year plan, I need a good reason why it wasn't on that 5-year plan.
yeah,
In
yep.
the past, it's all been like roadway and police cars. I think these things need to absolutely be on there. And if they're not, let's plug them in. And maybe that's a good thing to see next year, is to let's look at the 5-year plan and what would a couple of these larger items, let's say 80% of George's and 100% of this one, what would that make it look like for our debt service? And I'm still concerned about interest rates and the fact that they're falling down, that this might not be a good year to do it. But
Yeah,
anyways.
no, that's all valid points. Go ahead, Sean.
Couple points on the tennis courts, and it might be surprising that one of my kids he does lessons there with Bob, who also taught me and my brothers many years ago. I won't say how many years ago, but a few months ago, I walked the tennis courts, even though I was dropping my son off and picking him up almost weekly. I never really walked around on the tennis courts. I don't go out and there's a couple of craters in those courts. The courts are basically splitting in half. They're actually in the worst shape I've ever seen. So they're beyond repair. There's actually the section closest to the fire station where ironically, where the pickleball courts get set up, that probably shouldn't be played on anymore. The gap is so wide you could put your foot in it and probably roll an ankle. I got to imagine if we get some nasty freeze thaws this year, if winter comes, it's going to get worse. That being said, my other point to trying to piece this together, the biggest part of this project is the tennis courts. If anyone remembers the Woodland Street project or some others, that reclaimer that reclaims and pulverizes the asphalt is a massive, massive machine. That's what's going to be on that tennis court. They're basically going to just pulverize what's there, compact it, grade it, and start over and repave it. So that's the first thing that needs to happen. The fence needs to get out of the way, and they do that. So it would be nice to do some of the other work, but all of it would be destroyed. And I would also just mention that we should almost be embarrassed the fact that the tennis court, which should be the most accessible recreation facility in town, isn't even close. You'd have to pick someone up in a wheelchair to get them onto that tennis court. And it's not because of the road. It's not because of the parking. It's because there's no paths going to and from it. And it's a grading issue. It's just enough of an issue that we almost did it as the DPW, but it was going to be kind of patchwork if we had done it. So the town, we shouldn't allow our recreation facilities to look like that. It's right in downtown and there's no chance. You couldn't even get a child's stroller onto that tennis court without almost tripping over it. So we should take that seriously and work on it.
And the gates aren't very wide either, but yes, it's true.
Dave, what's the expected lifespan of a new tennis court before it needs to be resurfaced?
Probably somewhere in the range from 25 to 35 years. So this should
okay.
last a while.
That's
Yeah.
a long time.
I mean,
Okay.
it may need to be resurfaced. It has to be taken care of, and it may need to be resurfaced at a fraction of this project costs.
Yeah.
But along that lifetime. But yeah, you can expect it to last for a while.
Okay.
I've been here 25 years, so they've resurfaced them once, I think, but they've been there without any major changes. I think we actually replaced the light poles about 4 or 5 years ago, if I recall. All right, I think we covered that one. So that's all our capital projects. Does everyone want any further information on capital? I thank all the budget makers for attending and briefing us, and for also your diligence in preparing the analyses. And we'll ruminate some more with input from advisory and capital budget, I think. So I think we'll move on to the next agenda item unless anyone has any final comments. Next agenda item
Just
is,
thank people who,
go ahead.
just want people who showed up who didn't speak, but that's kind of a good thing for them, to be honest with you, because
Yeah, we appreciate
I look
you.
at
We
Zach here and everything else. And
probably should have released you previously, but anyway, I think we've covered it pretty well. So the next item is just the consent agenda, and that's another one of Paul's fortes. Do you want to make a motion with respect?
Move approval of the consent agenda.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Eric?
Aye.
Stephen?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Marion?
Aye.
And I am I as well. So we're on to the routine business. I had 2 items I wanted to bring up under select board reports. The first is, and it kind of came up tonight earlier, I would like us from now on, whenever we reappoint anyone to a board in town, whatever kind of board it is, that we just confirm beforehand that their ethics training is current, so that it's a way of us to keep people compliant with the state Department of Ethics in taking that training. It's unfortunate. I think I mentioned to some people earlier that we have 3-year terms for most boards, but the training is only good for 2 years. I sort of wish they'd make the ethics training every 3 years so that it would be concurrent with the term of appointment. But long story short, what I'm suggesting and what I've talked about with Jeremy and Diane is we'll just, anytime we have a reappointment to a board, we'll just ask the person to complete the training prior to us reappointing them so that they're then current with the ethics training. And it takes about an hour to do. Go ahead, Paul.
The cities of the state have often have 2-year terms.
That's why it is. Okay.
Remember, and they have to have a rule that applies statewide.
Yeah. That makes sense. All right. So that was my first one. The second one is you saw the note that we're being asked to upgrade our education system by talking to the 3rd grade classes at Pine Hill. What I would like to do, what they have this year, they have 3 3rd grade classes. I would prefer that Marlene was custodio is the head of the head teacher for 3rd grade. We were individually going to respond to her. I think it would be better if we did it simultaneously. One select board, in other words, get 3 select board members, 1 in each of 3 classrooms. Because I don't think it's as good if we do one class this week and another class the next week. They'll be out in the playground arguing about it, and why didn't we get to see it? So I think it would be way better if we could all offline maybe coordinate a time that 3 of us could go to Pine Hill and just spend an hour with a 3rd grade class. It might be kind of fun. I even mentioned to Marlene that it might be kind of cool to have each of us go to a select board member go to a single classroom, but maybe we could get all the 3rd grade in the auditorium afterwards for maybe half an hour just to sort of have an integrated session or something. We can design it, but how do people feel about that?
That works for me as long as it's a Monday.
Okay, well, we can work it out. Or maybe Diane can help us coordinate, or Jeremy, and we can get someone to coordinate, but
Middle of the day is a little tough for me.
doing it simultaneously would be way better.
Middle day can be a little tough. I just have to know.
Well,
just
as
make
long
sure I
as
forward it.
I'm not sure how Marion or Paul's schedule is, but as long as there's 3 of us, there's 3 sections. So they definitely want to have some time spent in the individual classroom with each class. So
Yeah,
we would,
I'm willing to do it. If you need someone to do it, I can do it.
we'll have to coordinate the dates, but I'm just proposing that originally they decided that we would just individually coordinate with her, but then it might be different weeks or different days. I think it'd be much better for the whole 3rd grade to have the same session simultaneously.
Fine. Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, that's all I have. Are there any other select board reports?
I'll just make a comment about the 3rd grade thing, is that I've spoken before groups of 1,000 people. I've spoken before subcommittees of state legislature, and I've been on TV.
Yeah.
And none of those intimidate me a classroom of 3rd graders.
Yeah, I know. And I did it. I went and spoke to them, and I was sitting in the chair where my knees were on my chin, and I'm not a tall person to begin with. But I actually went and met with the 3rd grade last year because of demographics 4 3rd grade sections last year. And I went and met with one of the classrooms briefly. So are there other select board reports? All right, hearing none. Jeremy, do you have some town administrator updates?
Yeah, I have a handful for you. Some staffing updates to relay. We've been having some discussions with the Energy and Sustainability Committee about the future of the Sustainability Coordinator position. So lots of good discussion there with them, and trying to put together a proposal on moving forward there. The latest is I did reach out to all of our neighboring communities. One, just to set up, I wanted to set up just sort of regular meetings with them anyway, but also our first meeting would be focused on sharing regional services to see where things might fit. So and also in that invitation mentioned that we're looking into how the future of our sustainability position. And Holliston and Medfield were quick to get back to me saying they would love to talk about sharing a sustainability coordinator. So there's some traction there, and the Energy and Sustainability Committee is very receptive to that as well. So sort of the latest on the sustainability coordinator. More to come on that. Hopefully that will bear some more fruit as far as sharing services and things and other ideas with our neighbors as well. On the Board of Health Administrator, Ellen, almost nearly 38 years with Sherborn, an amazing career. With her retirement coming up shortly, we had a meeting, Diane and I, with Daryl and Julie, and also Jen Thompson of Capital Strategic Solutions, who had done some help looking at that position in the past. And Jen, so we had a meeting earlier this week to coordinate on putting together a job advertisement for that position to help fill that role. So a general update there on staffing. And then just wanted to note a couple big things at the State House that Paul probably has more detail on than I, but recently the governor has filed the so-called Municipal Empowerment Act, which has some interesting proposals in it, and that'll work its way through the legislature, but interesting proposals to increase some flexibilities for municipalities. Raising some of the meals and rooms tax as a local option to raise motor vehicle excise surcharges. It provides will allow the creation of regional boards of assessors and sharing of board of assessor staff, which is certainly interesting. Includes some improvements to procurement law to make things more efficient. Also includes some enforcement on double poles, utility poles, and also would establish some central evaluation for telecom and utility properties. So that's currently done locally at the Board of Assessors. This would establish sort of a uniform way that the state would do that for towns. So some interesting proposals there. And also the governor and the House as well have filed their initial budget proposals for FY25. And there's not a whole lot of state aid that Sherborn gets, but according to those proposals, our state aid would go up about 3%. The budget model that we discussed with advisory had a 2% estimate, so 3% is good news. I did look at our cherry sheet numbers. They've already published the draft cherry sheet as a result of the published budgets. Unfortunately, our assessments go up about the same amount as the local aid goes up. So the state gives and the state takes away. So it's sort of a net zero right now as far as the budget proposals from the state. So
the town spends.
There we do.
All I got. Thanks,
All right. Thank you very much, Jeremy. All right. Paul, I think we're due for a motion.
My famous motion. I move we adjourn.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. A roll call, Eric.
Aye.
Stephen.
Aye.
Paul.
Aye.
Marion.
Aye.
And I am as well. And thank you to Jeremy and Diane for a lot of work this week. We had a lot of crazy stuff going on. So some of it didn't even make the agenda, but it still consumed time. So thanks for all the support that you provided this week, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great discussion tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Good
Have a great
night.
night, everybody.
Yep.
You too.
Ciao, guys.
Yeah.